Do you ever just lose interest while doing a certain thing and then still keep doing it? Or do you just keep waiting for something to happen and feel like you can't act on the next thing until the thing that you're waiting for actually happens? And do you also sometimes just keep doing a little too much? You do more than necessary, you over-prepare, you gather more information than you need to do a simple task? Because if you do any of these things, you are basically falling in various overthinking patterns. The book Mental Traps, The Overthinker's Guide to a Happier Life by André Kukla talks about 12 commonly found overthinking patterns that make our lives miserable. Because these habits may give us the illusion of achieving something of value. We may feel like we are making progress or doing things the right way, but the truth is that they actually delay our progress. They just waste our time. They just occupy our minds and suck all our energy. So for the purpose of this video, I have picked 3 such common patterns that we must avoid at any cost. And the number 1 such pattern is something called persistence. It's where you keep doing that thing even after it has lost its value. And I'm not talking about big lifelong projects. I'm talking about simple day-to-day activities. Things like watching a bad movie until the very end, not because you're expecting something great to happen at the end of it. We know there's nothing great that's going to happen. It's just a horribly directed and acted movie that makes us cringe every time the main actors are delivering their dialogues. But we're still watching it until the very end because we started watching it and we never stopped and we don't know why we are doing it. And it's because of various reasons. It may come from this core belief that persistence is a wonderful virtue, and it is in some cases, but then it's our job to make a clear distinction between perseverance and pointless persistence. Because in the case of perseverance, where we come over obstacles even when we feel like giving up, such as running a marathon or finishing a difficult course or a project, we know there's a lot of value at the end of it, and that sense of achievement is great for our mindset and our well-being. But in the case of pointless persistence, like watching a bad movie until the very end, the act of making that effort psychologically feels the same, but we don't gain anything from it. It just wastes our time. But somehow the mind, cannot make that distinction. It just wants to keep acting on that self-made promise that really doesn't give it any joy. Instead, it robs it of all the joys. This book calls it the law of mental inertia, which is similar to, Newton's law of motion, where a physical body keeps moving until an external force stops it. So in the case of mental inertia, we feel like just because we have begun an activity, we now must keep moving in the same direction until, of course, something more important or urgent comes our way. We, keep eating that bad food that doesn't even taste good. We keep staying in a social situation that doesn't even serve us anymore, makes us feel miserable. And I'm, pretty sure if you dissected your own life, you may come up with multiple such situations where you do the thing that doesn't add any value, and at the same time, you also don't know why you're doing them. So then the way to overcome this habit is to constantly question it, to evaluate your end goal. And when you do that, when you question your own behaviors, you may realize that most of the times there is no end goal. You're doing something without enjoying them because that's how you do things. And that's because you haven't considered the alternatives, or you haven't been intentional with your actions. Alright, so the second kind of mental trap is something called fixation. This is where you feel like you can't move ahead with your tasks because you're stuck. And why? Because you're waiting for something else to happen first. And the funny thing is that those 2 tasks are not interdependent, meaning the progress of one task doesn't impact the progress of the other task because they are mutually exclusive. They are not related at all. So, for example, you may feel like you can't do your laundry until you have a reply from your colleague about the status of a project, or you can't go to the gym today because you haven't yet received the results of the interview that you gave yesterday, but you expect the result to come out anytime. So instead of going to the gym, you end up checking your emails 15 times to see if there is any progress. You go through the details of the interview over and over again because you just want to make sure that you did the right thing. And we do this because all of these things may give us the sense of accomplishment because we feel like we are occupied with something that's worthy of our time. But in reality, we are just paralyzed by anticipation and anxiety. And the truth is that the more information you look for in that time about a past event, the more flaws you will find in your actions. So you may spot more mistakes. You may start, being overly critical of your own responses, which will then lead to more anxiety, which in turn will paralyze you even further, because this state of your mind is very paradoxical in nature. It's fully occupied, and at the same time, it's not occupied at all. You may think you are doing something when you are in this fixed state, but if you were to describe what you are actually doing, you may realize that you're doing absolutely nothing. You're just in a state of suspension. You're just delaying your next move. And in a very ironic way, you're just too busy waiting. And this waiting leads you to worry, this leads you to wish, it leads you to dream, wonder, hope. But it's not the good kind of wonder where you sit quietly and your, mind generates more creative ideas. This is just a bad kind of wondering. It's the kind of wondering where you wish to go back to that interview and imagine yourself giving a different answer. You wish for a favorable outcome based on an imaginary situation that you created in your head. And if this wait is for a couple of hours, it's okay. It may impact your life a little bit. But what if this wait is longer than that? What if it's for 2 days? It's for 5 days or a week? How much of your time are you going to spend in that fixed state where you cannot seem to, do anything that you should be doing? And I think I personally have dealt with this issue quite a bit in my life, and then realized that the things that I'm putting off, the chores, the workouts, the laundry, while I'm in this fixed state, are the things that bring me more peace. Because otherwise, your mind might create this sense of illusion where you feel like you have a sense of control, but in reality, you don't. Because the actual control lies in taking action, in doing the next thing that will take your mind off from this worry and anticipation. And that's because when you are occupied with the other tasks, you are giving your mind some other engaging obstacles to overcome. Alright, so the third kind of mental trap is something called amplification. This is where we work harder than needed. We pack too many clothes for a vacation. We micromanage a project. We try to over-engineer a simple solution or a simple task. And the reason why these things are considered a mental trap is because when we are over-preparing, when we are doing a little too much, we are basically not achieving more. In fact, we are achieving less because we are squandering all our resources. We are creating more issues than we are solving. And so this book compares this sort of behavior to swatting a fly with a sledgehammer, which I thought was a very clever metaphor. And so one common example of this kind of behavior is what I see at work. I see it when people start, tracking the progress of one single project on multiple trackers and then start, collecting all sorts of unnecessary data. And, it makes the dashboard look great, but it doesn't give us any newer insights. In fact, all that data turns into noise and creates more admin work. And this sort of amplification where the work expands to a degree more than necessary can happen in two directions. It can expand vertically as well as horizontally. So when it comes to horizontal amplification, we try to create more subtasks within our primary task, where we gather all sorts of adjacent information that are not really needed. So let's say you're trying to book a dinner reservation. You look at a few restaurants and then you call all of them, then you go through their entire menu and services, you find out the parking information, and you do all this despite having shortlisted a few that you really like. And you can see why this is a problem, because all that extra work that you're doing doesn't really add more value. And even if it does add more value once in a while, generally speaking, it's not worth all that effort. Because in a lot of cases, that extra work that you did, it starts to become problematic and starts being counterproductive, because now you have more information but less conviction. You're more confused now. So you should definitely not fall in this kind of mental trap. Now, the other kind of amplification is the vertical amplification. And here you're waiting to complete a previous subtask to move forward. But then that previous task depends on another previous task that has not been completed yet. So let's say you are really, amped up about making a special kind of dish for your guests, and you realize that you're out of, certain necessary ingredients.